about this next one. Yes. What is what? Observation, debrief, cycle, conversations. So does facilitating those in truly a conversational way, which is also part of the training, which I would also say is hard. Actually, one more point on partnership. I think last year, and this is sort of why we have this now, I do think some CMAs, were like, this is really difficult. And I was like, yeah, holding adults accountable for things, because sometimes there are things we need to talk to them about, like being late or something like that, in a way that also doesn't undermine partnership. I think it's totally possible. It is totally possible, but I think it's right. There's a skill there. There's a skill in talking to someone about saying, hey, I noticed you were 5 minutes late, and talking about why. And just being sort of natural, and it doesn't have to be this like type of thing. Sometimes you do need to have serious conversations. I mean, I just want to point out that I'm not like just boop, 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 X, Y, Z, get it done. It's like, no, this is actually there are some places where I think it's like it will be helpful to role play a conversation. It will be helpful to talk through what you're actually going to say to someone, because you always want to have in mind, I don't want to undermine my relationship with this person. And that, I think, is above anything else. What got us so far is that people just had it top of mind. I want to make sure that my core members and I are on the same page. And I think just having it that top of mind made an enormous difference. Like just that, along with communicating a lot of the teacher strategies, make those two things just shot up through the roof. So the last thing, would there be more text on these slides? Not a good example, and I made the slides. So the one thing that my team and I talked about at the beginning of the year that we said was sort of absent from, not absent from the culture, and not absent certainly from already some frameworks and like our kind of, paradigm, but absent in focus was like, literally, focus or relentless pursuit of results and sense of possibility. In part because there was a study done with people applying to the core who were eventually admitted. This was done last year. And they asked a series of questions that core members self-identify. Things like, when I'm in a challenge, I easily give up. When I see a situation, I look for the positive or the negative jumps out to me. Like a whole series of questions. And you would think that, of course, people are going to answer like, really high. And they were actually pretty honest. People answered all over the board. And they correlated that to the way the core members were doing. And there was a high correlation for people who self-identified strongly along these things and who did well. That to me is not surprising, right? Like, if you're a person who typically, I'm a person who typically starts a lot of tasks and doesn't finish them. I mean, if that is typically something you do, to me it's not surprising that they're struggling. So my team and I said, well, why don't we try and build that in people? Let's assume that they're bringing a level of it, but let's just make sure we're not losing sight of these messages. And we were actually trying to come up with some new name. We're like, maybe we'll call it grit. Maybe it's the grit. And we're like, no, it already exists in our culture. It's called relentless pursuit of results and sense of possibility. We already talk about this, but does it get lost in the stuff? And so, school directors, you have like a one-pager in your accordion. That's sort of a document that my team and I have put together on what we mean by relentless pursuit of results and what we don't mean. Because what I think it can't mean is it cannot be the behavior police. It cannot be like, I saw your eyes blink shut for more than 3 seconds during a session. That's not what, that will undermine partnership, right? That will become a complete contradiction of partnership and undermine everything we're trying to accomplish. But more of that, we can do a lot more, I think, to authentically infuse messages around these things that set an example. And there's 2 things in particular that I want to talk about. The first is, we as a staff are not going to apologize for hard work. There is a fundamental difference between saying to someone, the next 2 years of your life are going to require an enormous amount of work. And there are times when it's going to be satisfying and times when it's going to be really frustrating. But I'm glad you're here to do it. Here we go. Conversely, you could say something like, the next 2 years are going to be really hard. And there are times when you're going to want to give up. There have been times when I wanted to give up. I just didn't want to go to school. And you'll get through it. There is a fundamental difference there. And I see staff members doing this, and I think I've done it too, because you want to empathize with the core members and try to make them feel better. You try to sort of alleviate maybe some of the pressure they're putting on themselves, but I don't think it's helpful. Because is it going to require an enormous amount of work over the next 2 years? Are they going to work 70+ hours a week over the next 2 years? If they don't work that much, I'm not going to put an exact number on it, but are they going to be that successful? No. I think there's, a way to talk about it as like, yeah, it is going to be hard. But we're assuming that you are coming here, and I say 70, but I mean, on a given week 70, on a given week 60, on a given week 50, not 40, right? I mean, that's what we know. No, it's true. So, and I think I know why we do it. We do it to, try and make them feel better. And I just don't think it's helpful. And I also don't think it's helpful to overwhelm them, to tell them horror stories. And I do think you want to think about, you are examples for them. Very quickly, by the end of week 1, you are going to be their most complete picture, the CMA and the CS, their most complete picture of what a teacher is. Like, that's going to start to be their new conception. It is actually a huge responsibility of yours to set the right kind of example. So that's the first thing, is like not apologizing for hard work. You can acknowledge hard work, celebrate it, right? Like, that's, right? It's like, wow, you worked really hard, that's awesome. Like, celebrate, recognize it, appreciate it, but not apologize for it. Okay. And then the second thing, those reflections I have. Oh, just in general, the way we talk and describe challenges that we've had. So again, sort of two differences. I struggled with classroom management in my first year as a teacher. I also struggled with planning. There were several points in which I taught elementary where the last 30 minutes of class, especially in my first semester teaching 3rd grade, I pulled out geography bingo, multiplication bingo, because it was out of stuff to do. I'm going to, 2 different ways I think of framing that to core members. The first, I also really struggled with planning. It was one of the biggest struggles I had in my first year. There were days when I was not well planned. It was a hard day. My classroom management typically went down the tubes because I didn't have stuff to engage my kids. And there were some times where I pulled out the bingo for them to play because I was like, out of stuff to do. However, in my second year, that was like my main priority. Over the summer, I did a ton of work, and I made sure I was planned for the first 3 months. I won't say I was planned for the whole year, I was not. But really that I had my long-term plans, my unit plans, and even daily lesson plans, at least a skeleton for the first 3 months done. And that wasn't a problem I had in my second year. In fact, it was the opposite, where most of the time it was like, oh gosh, the bell's about to ring and I'm not done. Okay, option A. Option B, you could say something like, I know you're struggling with planning. I did too. There were days I was a slacker, I had my kids playing bingo, and the story stops there. And I think about, I want to ask myself, if you had a child, your own child, what would you do? And they're going to go to be in a teacher's classroom, what kind of orientation do you want them to have to challenge? I think unwittingly we can open the door and say, it's okay to be not planned. There's a difference. It's human to be not planned, potentially. It can happen, thank you. But it's not okay. Tell the rest of the story. Tell the rest of the story about the fact that you knew that that wasn't good, that it had really serious ramifications for not just your kids, but actually you too, on some level, and that you worked to improve it. Don't. If it didn't happen overnight, don't say that. I mean, that was a whole year that it took me to get that under my belt. And I think there's a way, you don't want to paint yourself as this, perfect teacher from day one. That's not realistic, and I don't think that's anyone's experience. You also don't want to open the door for core members of it's totally okay, everyone, and actually that's not true. I will also say that there are some core members in their first year who knock it out of the park. And they actually don't struggle with classroom management. And they don't struggle with planning. Maybe they struggle with one of those things, but it's not no, not necessarily. So I don't think we want to paint this picture of really I think what is the first year is a wash. The first year is a wash. It's not true. We have more first years making significant gains this year than we ever have before. More first years than second years in a lot of cases. Because actually the training, we're always almost behind. Because the training gets so much better every year. They start at a higher place. It's challenge. We're working on it. It really is. So can I get some reaction to those two things? It's not apologizing for work and also not describing your challenges in an authentic way that